Welcome to Season 2 of Fresh Off the Boat. I'm delighted to be with Tushar Chetal, a student I've known since maybe 2013, 14, when you were applying to colleges and ended up going to Carnegie Mellon for a computer engineering degree. So today, since you've been there, done that, we've also featured many students who've done computer science, computer engineering, ECE degrees from so many colleges. I thought of starting it a bit differently and focusing more on real life skills, more on not just the technical, but also in general that colleges prepare you for, or maybe don't, and just touch upon some of that. And after a brief introduction, we just dive into that question.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Arjun. I'm really excited to be here. I've been, keeping up with some of your podcasts, so really excited to be here.
Super. So, what do you think is the computer engineering degree all about, and how would you say it translates into different career paths, and particularly
Yeah,
a little
so
bit more about Carnegie Mellon as well?
yeah, I think CMU does it pretty much standard how most colleges will do it. There's kind of, if you want to get into this computer science programming field as your final job, there's about three sort of paths you can take. You can take like the computer science general path, which tends to be very like, it's sort of like the programming concept plus your typical like more of a math focused programming. And then you can also get into sort of the more side of things. Computer engineering is sort of the programming aspect of computer science, but with a lot of the engineering and physics skills. So if you're more into physics side of things, computer engineering is more, around doing the actual sort of like day-to-day programming stuff, less of the theoretical things. Plus, you also get a lot of the engineering and electrical engineering things, specifically at CMU, because CMU's major is electrical and computer engineering. They don't have a pure CE thing, which I think is honestly a really good thing. And then the third thing to get into sort of this programming CS side of things is, funnily enough, math. A lot of my friends who were math majors have now work at, your typical programming job.
Yeah, thanks. That's a pretty good summary of, say, the paths. So, what made you choose computer engineering, and how did you then apply that maybe in your first few professional internships or even your first job?
Yeah, it was a really difficult decision, honestly, because I don't know how familiar some of your listeners are with the first year at CMU. You are kind of majorless, which is pretty standard for most colleges, I would say, right? You're admitted to the general engineering school, but you can still switch around basically anywhere based on some factors. I sort of knew always that I wanted to get into this programming sort of field. My 11th and 12th elective was CS, so I was sort of poised up to be in the programming field. I specifically chose computer engineering because I think having that more holistic experience, less of the theoretical, and just focusing more on some of the day-to-day engineering applications, it's really interesting to get like that. The typical engineering mentality that people say, you get a lot of interesting applications through that. Plus, specifically at CMU, your ECE degree puts you in charge with a bunch of really interesting things, and I can dive more into sort of the thing, but there's four different kinds of ECE at CMU, which I was really excited about too.
Yeah, that'll be great. I think the purpose of this conversation is also to go a little bit deeper. So, what are the four tracks of the ECE degree at Carnegie Mellon, and how did you kind of navigate that journey?
Yeah, so the four are your typical software engineering. So that's just programming. Most of the classes in that track are your data structures, algorithms classes that are pretty like theoretical. Essentially, what your CS degree is. Your then you have signals and systems, which focuses more on sort of network analysis. So you take it with like sound system analysis. So it's really interesting. Found a really interesting pairing with machine learning nowadays. So if you want to get into like audio machine learning, signals and systems is a really good pairing, which is what I ended up choosing. A little spoiler, just because I'm really into that side of things. So if you want to do video processing, video machine learning, any of that stuff. There is the digital signal processing track, I believe it's called, which focuses more on your sort of firmware devices, so like lower level Arduinos and all those different things. So that's kind of where the digital signal processing thing goes. Pretty interesting, but sort of very niche for my liking. And then the last one is your very typical, hardcore electrical hardware engineering track that will put you up to be like a circuit developer at Intel or something like that.
Thanks again. I think reading text online and going through coursework, it's becoming old-fashioned these days. So I think this helps our viewers and listeners hear it from the horse's mouth. So tell me a little bit, when beyond just the academics, I know it's quite an intense pressure cooker situation, given the fact that students who aspire to be computer scientists or engineers, they're all looking at those coveted, end prizes, which is jobs at Google, like where you are at today. And so there's that added pressure to be the best or, keep up with everyone. What was it like for you to balance that intense academic workload Carnegie Mellon is infamous for, or many colleges, I would say, are infamous for? And what did you do to sort of stay sane?
Yeah. Honestly, I feel like there's a little bit of a misidea around CMU being super crazy academically focused. Like obviously the classes are really challenging, but I think what makes CMU specifically hard is that everyone kind of was the smartest person from their school, and the not necessarily the smartest, but the most driven person at their school. And they just like people do everything. So it's like very common for everyone to be taking 4 to 5 classes, and beyond that, you're still doing like 2 to 3, 4 different like big club things that you're doing extracurricular activities. Some people have sports, people have starting their own clubs. People, I started a dance marathon. I had a bunch of different campus jobs. I was TAing a sign language course because that's something I picked up at CMU, and just that you just do that. So I think a lot of that adds that intense pressure. So there were a lot of people who kind of just stuck to the academics, and I would say they got through it pretty easily, or not super, but they were able to sort of get through it without that intense pressure cooker. But the thing that makes CMU really challenging is just the number of things people are doing, and you are sort of incentivized, semi forced into it, and semi you just kind of want to be doing all the cool things that your classmates are doing, right?
Yeah. So I did visit CMU back in 2018, and it was, yeah, obviously quite. It was really refreshing to see that the culture, which is work hard as well as figure out how to have fun, because everyone else is so driven and interesting, was something that I caught on. Now, if you were to kind of move forward and let's say in terms of pre-professional goals that you set up back then and now after working for 3 years or so, what is it you feel your journey has been, and did it go as per plan?
Not at all, as I'm sure you're not surprised to hear at all. I've had, I'm currently at a very, normal and very, it's something that people look forward to, is working at a FANG company. Really happy with that, but I think my journey here has been pretty non-standard in terms of the things people tell you to do. I didn't do a lot of the things that are, that people will be like, oh, this, if you want to, if your main goal is to get into a FANG company as a software engineer, that's what you do. I think the main advice that I have for people who are going into looking for that kind of a final career opportunity is to really focus on your internships. I think that's something I could have really done a better job on. I wasn't super, I was really passionate about the extracurriculars I was doing and all the different clubs and things I was starting, but I was putting a lot less effort into making sure that I had fun and interesting internships that I could talk about later. I think I ended up lucking out and finding some really nice internships that I could talk about that really helps out in your interviews, because if you think about it, someone who's 1 year out of college or less than 1 year out of college is really doesn't have a ton of things that they can be like, this is why you want me at your company, right? There's like, most of us are pretty generic early career. So having interesting internships and projects that you can talk about, having interesting experiences in your pre-professional growth is what can really help you set apart. Obviously, you need to have good programming skills, but those things can really help set you apart from your general software early career person.
Thanks. I think that really sums it up quite well. Now about working as an AI, artificial intelligence software engineer. Now, how would you define AI and roles in AI at organizations like Google. It seems like Google, right from the inception, somehow was using AI or was interested in sort of figuring those out. Uh, so, how would you
Are
describe?
you? Yeah, so just to clarify, I work in Google Cloud AI, but I'm a software engineer. I don't work on the AI side of things, although I do interface with a lot of AI engineers, and I do eventually. I am considering a career in AI over the long run, but yeah, I think there's a ton of different things you can do as part of an under the machine learning umbrella. You have your typical, what I think everyone would think of was the person building the models, but the problem with that, if you know, there's a lot of people looking for roles in AI and ML, is that you need a lot of education. You need your undergrad, your master's. Most like CMU now offers an undergrad degree in stats and ML. You need your, and most people, especially if you're trying to get into computer vision, audio analysis, natural language processing, are looking for a PhD or something, right? So having that can be really difficult at our stages. So I think a lot of the non-standard approaches to getting into ML is through some of the data engineering roles, some of the data processing roles, which, if you're not familiar, would just be taking into, there's a vast amount of data. That's what big data is. And we need to figure out not only how to understand and use that data to collect it, harness it, make sure it's nice and readable. But also, there's places that don't have a ton of data. So small data is a new thing that, or not a new thing, but a relatively new thing that we're looking at. And so, sort of doing all of the data side of things is what's a lot more early career people are looking at. And then once you sort of have either the career experience or the educational experience, you can get more into like the model development side of things. Again, very generalized, but that's generally what it is.
Super. So also now let's focus a little bit about Google Cloud. We all invariably are using Google Cloud in some platform or the other. Uh, what's the breakthrough? What's the next big breakthrough that we are headed toward in cloud technologies? And what are big companies working on?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how much I'm allowed to talk about. I specifically can talk about what team I'm sort of focused on, and then there's so much cool stuff coming out of cloud. Cloud really is the future of tech, at least, just because it's, I was part of the startup scene for a little bit in New York, and I think just having any sort of, like, especially as a college student or like a pre-college student, having experience with all the different cloud platforms there are, it just makes you so much better. You can you use those for hackathons if you want to get into a startup. Having, no one wants to manage their own servers and their own backends. If you can push that off to a bigger company, that's infinitely safer from a security perspective. It's easier, it's cheaper, it's perfect for a cloud person. So a lot of the cloud AI things that we're heading towards, like I said, there's just a lot of cool things going on. Google specifically, if you've been kind of keeping up with some of the Pixel phone stuff that they've been doing, audio analysis has gone ridiculously good. NLP and all that stuff is at a point where it can understand Hindi and English together. I've got the Pixel phones, and there's some really cool things going on around that. So I love NLP, so I'm a little biased. NLP is natural language processing, and so I think that's a really fun new area that we're going towards. And I think specifically, Google's sort of goal is thinking about like the next billion users. That is the sort of the industry term, which is who are like the next billion people that are going to be onboarded onto technologies, right? And a lot of those people are coming from Latin America and India, right? Because the sort of logic is that Indian consumers, a lot of them don't have experience with phones as much, and they're much more comfortable using voice to navigate their phone rather than actually doing all the navigation, right? So if you see, a lot of Google products will have focus around letting you do anything you want with your voice, and that makes it a lot more approachable for people who don't necessarily have that tech.
Yeah, so I think that's a very important point, where the user, not just the interface, but also the input devices are changing. I mean, the keyboard, the mouse, other things would be replaced with voice. Now, NLP, since you mentioned it, natural language processing, like what does one learn, like, to become better at it? What is the path to really going deeper into NLP?
That's a really interesting question that I'm definitely not poised to answer.
Okay.
I'm not the right person,
Okay,
but
sure.
I think there's a lot. Courses, best place to get started with anything. If nothing, Stanford has free courses that you can take. That's pretty much the best way. I will constantly be doing Stanford courses. In AI, I think it has a very cool healthcare AI course. CMU also has a bunch of free course. MIT Open Coursera is obviously world renowned. Other things that you can do to get into NLP, I think, is just take a simple project, like something like super simple that isn't breaking any universes open. It's for example, one of my really good friends, he was really excited. So I think he did something where he got a data set off of Kaggle, which is a pretty popular website where you can says he got a list of movies with summaries, and I think he just did a thing that would read a movie summary and it would figure out what genre of movie that was. So, for example, you have the Dark Knight summary from IMDb, and it would be like, this is an action thriller, which sounds really complicated, but it is pretty simple to do with NLP. So you can start building off like small projects that are fully solved online. You don't have to think about anything, but sort of getting an understanding of how to use most likely Python, and Python's fun library. So starting off with those smaller projects, using courses to sort of start building up your library. And if you're pre-college or early college, that is more than impressive enough to get you started.
So one last question, and we'll end with that. So when you look at your college life, and now you've been working um, in the industry, what's the romantic version that people have when they're in college about jobs, and what's the reality for you, and what's better, what's not so better? Let's give it a positive spin.
That's an amazing question. Really fun. I think some of the things that are really nice about work, and let me preface saying, I've spent about 6 months actually working in normal times pre-COVID. So a lot of my thoughts and stuff have been altered by working in a COVID atmosphere. Um, sorry. But yeah, I think a lot of the fun things that are true is you have your own schedule. You could be working 9 to 5, sort of check in, check out, do whatever you want. Most of the offices right now are really fun and really care about your mental health and well-being. So that's definitely a really nice part of college, where you don't have to take your work outside of 9 to 5 if you don't want to. You get your weekends off. You get to do whatever you want outside. And then if you want to put more time into work, if you want to put more time into extracurriculars at work, you have that option. And then or you can do your own stuff, do your own things. Stuff that isn't that exciting about working, I honestly I miss just being able to meet newer people all the time, especially people. I think something that's super underrated is outside of college, it's really hard to meet people your same age or in like similar life areas as you, which I mean is a good thing and a bad thing. Like, it's really cool right now that I can hang out with people who are straight out of college all the way up to like, one of my best friends at my old job was someone who was like 65. She was like, in a completely different headspace from me, but it was really interesting to be able to interact with those kind of people. So I think it's a double-edged sword over there.
That is great, actually. Thank you. This is the first time I asked this question on my podcast. It seems like I'll get different answers from people I interview.
It's a fun one, yeah.
So thanks again. Look forward to catching up sometime soon. I'm not making it to the Bay Area on my upcoming trip. I'm actually traveling tonight to Boston, and
Oh
I'm
wow.
there for 2 weeks. So look forward to catching up, maybe over a call. And if you
Yeah,
happen
that'll
to
be fun.
be on the East Coast, which I don't know, but yeah, look forward to seeing you too.
Yeah, I was supposed to be, but that'll be really fun. If you end up coming to Bay Area, let me know. We'll be able to grab some coffee and stuff.
All right. Thank you.
I'll give you a tour of the Google offices. I'm sure that'll be fun.
Great. I'll definitely take up that offer.